I bought this little mirrorless camera for just under $100, and I had a very specific project in mind for it. And while I had a hunch that this was going to be a great camera, especially for the price, I could not have predicted the response that I got from this project. One of the first pictures I ever took on it ended up on the Flickr Explore page, and just today another one landed there. Everywhere I post pictures, people seem to really dig the photos, which is awesome because I dig them too. Now you might have already figured out that in order to get these unusual colors, this camera was modded for infrared. But it didn't come that way, and I didn't pay anyone to do this. I did it myself, and I documented the whole process from start to end so you can see what it's like. It's really quite beginner friendly. If you're even just curious what the inside of this camera looks like and the process is, watch this whole thing because who knows, by the end you might want to do it too. Now the process is going to be different on different cameras. Obviously every camera is different, but the general process is going to be the same. This Olympus EPL2 happens to be a very affordable and easy camera to mod, so that's why I chose it. Thank you to those who pointed that out to me. A few quick disclaimers. This mod can absolutely brick your camera, so please do not do it unless you're willing to accept that risk. Also, there's a chance of bodily harm in a number of ways, I guess, but in particular, if you touch this little area over here, this is where the flash capacitor stores up its electricity, and you can get shocked if you touch that. And don't ask me how I figured that out. Do not attempt this mod unless you're willing to accept those risks. I'm going to be following a guide that somebody sent me from iFixit about how to take apart this camera, and hopefully it's accurate because it looks pretty easy. I do have a nice toolkit here from iFixit, not sponsored, but I'll put a link in the description because it does work well. Down at the bottom, some really small Phillips screws. Okay, so that's done with step one, pretty easy. Then over on the side of the camera, we're gonna remove these two screws. Okay, then I'm flipping the camera over and removing these two screws. So we're removing the back plate. And then there's a little metal covering called the hot shoe spring that's asking me to remove. That's right here. Just a little nudge gets it off. So that's what gives tension to your flash or whatever your accessory is. And then we want to remove these 4 silver screws. Now we'll remove the hot shoe plate, whatever this thing's called. If this is like some other Olympus cameras I've seen, this would be for your optional EVF accessory would plug in here, which is pretty cool that is offered. We're gonna take off this cover here, wedge in there, there we go. And there's 2 more screws hidden behind that. Now I believe we can take the back off. So I'm just gonna gently remove back because the LCD panel is gonna be plugged in, so I'm not gonna rip it. To be gentle here. Move the battery door open. There we go. So there's the plug for the LCD panel. So that's the ribbon cable right there, and you're just gonna pull that ribbon out gently. Go. And there is the LCD panel and buttons removed. That was really easy. Okay, the next part, we're gonna remove this cable, and then we do have to desolder this. So this little ribbon cable right here is soldered in. So it'll need to be touched just slightly to desolder that. There's actually a number of cables. So under here, there's some more ribbon cables that need to be removed. Over here as well. And then, yeah, then I'll go back and desolder that. There is a tricky screw back here behind this top plate, but without removing the top plate, you can remove it. You just gotta kind of shove this out of the way, it flexes. And that was enough to get the screwdriver in there, get a bite, and unscrew it. So there's a tip for that. And I must admit that I'm not a master solderer or anything like that. That did it. And there's a washer there. Try not to lose that. Okay, and then there's 3 more screws that are holding the actual like sensor mechanism in. So here, here, and here. Okay, so it's a little bit of a tangly mess with all the ribbons. So I'm just very carefully doing this so I don't rip anything. So there we go. There's a sensorless camera. And here is finally what we're super excited about. So that took me less than 30 minutes to get here. So far so good. Of course, we got to actually do our mods and then put the whole thing back together. So there's actually several layers of glass before we even get to the sensor. So you are not damaging your sensor if you touch this. You could scratch the glass that goes on top, but it won't be the sensor itself. So there are these 4 screws here. I'm also gonna put on a glove so I'm not getting fingerprints all over everything. So that comes off is a little ribbon cable attached to it. I'm just gonna try to move that out of the way. And then there's all these little tabs that were holding it, or not holding it, but kind of supporting it. This piece here just holds the lower filters in place. Yeah, just kind of with a little bit of pressure, it pries up. It is bending as I'm doing it. 2 of the tabs on the bottom stick out pretty deep underneath filters to hold them in place, I guess. So that's why the whole thing kind of bent to come out. I don't know how easy this will be to reuse, but we'll get there, we'll get there. Just doing a blower to minimize dust. So this next filter is the hot mirror filter. So this is what blocks infrared light from hitting the sensor and is only allowing the visible spectrum to hit the sensor. But if we remove this, then we're shooting in full infrared. So this is where you, if you were doing this, if you were doing this professionally, or even if you did a mod, you could buy a replacement glass here that is going to be the same thickness, but is going to just be like a clear pass through, even allowing infrared light through. I do not have that, so I'm gonna not have it. It can cause problems, like as I'm assembling this together, there might be some movement problems, so we'll just work through that. And also for autofocus issues. The actual sensor. So this is what we do not want to ruin yet. I'm gonna ruin it later, okay? I promise. And that's it. Now I just reverse the process, easier said than done, and assemble the camera. The whole thing took me about 30 minutes, which is really quick. And now the camera is capturing visible as well as infrared light. It's actually crazy if you think about it. You can now see invisible things like TV remote signals. Or here's my Sony V1 that has an infrared flashlight on the front, which is invisible to the naked eye, but clearly shows up on the Olympus now. So cool. You can shoot the camera just like this and get some interesting stuff, but I personally like the look that comes from throwing filters on the lens, specifically 2 kinds of filters. The first is this dark 850 nanometer filter, meaning that it's supposed to filter out light before 850 nanometers and leave in just infrared. That means to us, it looks completely black, but to the camera that has the infrared blocking filter removed, it enters you into this entirely new world of infrared light. Turn this into black and white, and you get that look from the latest Dune movie that everyone's raving about. I like this for the dramatic black and white shots where the sky is super dark and the clouds pop. And the second filter I love is this Calleri IR Chrome filter. Now, it's a mixture of a color blue filter and some infrared cut, with the result being sort of an aerochrome film look. It's more of an orange look than a red look, straight out of the camera, but I actually kind of like this better. Now, this filter is admittedly super expensive, but there's some guides online about how to get that same look using a combo of much cheaper filters. Maybe I'll try that sometime. Now, my camera works perfectly fine, except for one thing that seems kind of broken with this mod, and that's the autofocus of my non-wide angle lenses. My 14mm and 9mm lenses work just fine with autofocus, but my 25mm struggles to focus to infinity in autofocus mode, so just keep that in mind. You should be able to solve this if you bought a pass-through filter of the same size as the hot mirror filter. I just didn't have one, didn't want to buy one, and so I put up with it, and it works fine with the other lenses. The camera is also super compact, by the way, if you can't tell. With a pancake lens, it's getting close to a Ricoh GR. Not quite as small enough to fit into your normal pockets, but easily jacket pocketable. And at this point, I'll let you know that this camera is only 12 megapixels. Only. I say that as if it's a bad thing, but there's still tons of resolution here, and for most people's projects, it's really not gonna make or break anything. And remember, it was $100. It really goes to show that to capture great photographs and people's attention, you really don't need to spend a lot of money, and you definitely don't need the latest and greatest camera. If you like infrared stuff like this, check out this video here. I got a lot more about weird hacks you can do. And until next time, as always, happy snapping.